Question 1. In the context of HVACR rooftop unit maintenance, Mr. Anderson is preparing to work near the edge of a roof without guardrails. He notices that some workers are not using personal fall arrest systems. False. What should Mr. Anderson do to ensure compliance with OSHA standards and protect all personnel? A. Wait until the workers complete their tasks before addressing the issue. B. Immediately halt the work and ensure that all workers use proper fall protection. C. Rely on administrative controls to remind workers periodically. D. Use cones to mark unsafe areas, but allow work to continue. Answer. Correct answer, B. Explanation. OSHA requires that all employees exposed to fall hazards use appropriate fall protection, such as falls or guardrails. Simply marking areas or relying on reminders does not eliminate the hazard. Allowing work to continue without corrective action exposes employees to significant risk and violates safety regulations. Halting the work and ensuring compliance immediately enforces both legal and responsibilities, reducing the likelihood of injury. Administrative controls alone are insufficient, and waiting for completion neglects immediate hazards. Question 2. Through the lens of adult learning principles, Ramirez notices that HVACR trainees disengage during long lecture sessions about electrical hazards. Which strategy would most effectively enhance comprehension and retention for adult learners? They increase the lecture duration and add more technical terms. B. Incorporate interactive demonstrations and problem-solving exercises. C. Assign multiple-choice tests immediately after each lecture. D. Limit discussions to written materials only. Answer. Correct answer, B. Explanation. Adult learners benefit from experiential, problem-based, and interactive learning approaches. Hands-on demonstrations allow learners to visualize hazards and apply critical thinking to real-world scenarios. Long lectures and passive reading often lead to disengagement and poor retention. Immediate testing without active engagement does not enhance practical comprehension. Interactive strategies foster situational awareness, reinforce key principles, and align with OSHA training best practices. Question 3. Considering the evidence, Mr. Patel is tasked with instructing trainees on handling refrigerants safely. One trainee accidentally releases a small amount of R410 in a poorly ventilated indoor space. What is the safest immediate response? A. Ignore it and continue working, as small releases are harmless. B. Evacuate the area, ventilate, and follow emergency procedures. C. Fan the area manually while continuing work. D. Cover the leak with a cloth to absorb the refrigerant. Answer. Correct answer, D. Explanation. Refrigerant leaks, even small amounts, can displace oxygen and cause respiratory hazards, especially in confined spaces. The correct approach is to evacuate the area, ventilate properly, and follow emergency procedures including PPE use and leak containment. Ignoring the leak or attempting makeshift absorption compromises safety. Immediate response reduces the risk of asphyxiation, frostbite from or other injuries. Training must emphasize hazard recognition, safe handling, and compliance with OSHA refrigerant safety protocols. Question 4. Given the circumstances, Mr. Liu is conducting training on lockout-tagout (LOTO) for HVACR systems. He demonstrates energizing a unit without verifying that all LOTO procedures were followed. Which concept is most critical for the trainees to understand? A. The importance of administrative reminders. B. The hierarchy of hazard controls and verification of isolation. C. That PPE alone can prevent all injuries. D. That supervision can replace procedure compliance. Answer. Correct answer, C. Explanation. LOTO procedures protect workers from unexpected energy releases. Simply relying on PPE or supervision does not eliminate hazards. The critical concept is understanding that energy must be controlled through verified isolation, lockout devices, and proper tagging. Administrative reminders assist but do not prevent injury. Proper LOTO ensures mechanical, electrical, and thermal energy are safely dented, emphasizing that compliance is procedural, not optional. Trainees must grasp that verification and control are central to hazard mitigation. Question 5. When analyzing excavation work, Thompson observes workers in a trench deeper than 5 feet without protective systems. Which OSHA-compliant action should she take? A. Allow work to continue while observing for hazards. B. Immediately implement protective systems such as sloping, shoring, or shielding. C. Issue verbal warnings only. D. Reduce the work crew to minimize risk. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. OSHA requires protective systems for trenches deeper than 5 feet unless in stable rock. Failure to implement shoring, sloping, or shielding exposes workers to cave-ins, one of the most common causes of excavation fatalities. Verbal warnings or reducing crew size are inadequate controls. Immediate protective measures safeguard life and comply with regulations. Trainers must emphasize hazard recognition, proper system selection, and enforcement of excavation safety protocols to prevent catastrophic incidents. Question 6. As demonstrated by recent incidents, Mr. Jenkins must instruct HVACR workers on safe lifting and rigging of rooftop units. Which principle should he prioritize to prevent musculoskeletal injuries and equipment damage? A. Encouraging teamwork without using mechanical aids. B. Utilizing proper lifting techniques and mechanical lifting devices. C. Relying solely on the strength of individual workers. D. Moving units quickly to save time. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Safe lifting and rigging require applying mechanical aids, team coordination, and proper body mechanics. Relying on individual strength or rushing the process increases the risk of injury and equipment damage. Emphasizing ergonomics, load calculations, and rigging hardware aligns with OSHA guidelines and industry best practices. Trainees must understand the hierarchy of controls. Engineering solutions, hoists, lifts, supersede manual methods. Instruction should blend demonstration with hands-on practice to instill safe behaviors. Question 7. From a practical standpoint, Nguyen is reviewing a recent near-miss during brazing in a confined boiler room. Sparks ignited combustible materials. What should she emphasize in her training to prevent recurrence? A. Only focusing on personal protective equipment. B. The importance of pre-work hazard assessment and fire prevention measures. C. That accidents are unavoidable in HVACR work. D. Relying solely on fire extinguishers after ignition. Answer. Correct answer. D. Explanation. Preventing fire hazards requires identifying combustible materials, using proper ventilation, maintaining fire watches, and establishing emergency response protocols before starting hot work. PPE alone cannot prevent ignition. Reacting post-incident is insufficient. Proactive measures are critical. Trainees must learn hazard assessment, engineering controls, and administrative precautions. Effective demonstrates fire prevention planning, proper equipment use, and emergency readiness to reduce risk and comply with OSHA's welding, cutting, and brazing standards. Question 8. To illustrate this point, Mr. Garcia is conducting a lesson on hazardous chemical handling in HVACR maintenance. A trainee questions why safety data sheets (SDS) must be consulted even for commonly used refrigerants. How should he respond? A. SDS review is optional for familiar chemicals. B. SDS provides critical information on exposure PPE and emergency procedures. C. Only new employees need to read SDS. D. SDS are primarily for administrative record keeping. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. SDS are required to communicate hazards, recommend EPE, first aid measures, and proper handling for all chemicals, including commonly used refrigerants. Familiarity does not eliminate risk. Even minor exposures can cause serious health effects. Administrative reasons alone do not justify SDS consultation. Training should emphasize that hazard communication through SDS is a legal requirement under OSHA HASCOM standards and forms the basis for safe work practices and informed decision-making during maintenance and emergency situations. Question 9. While examining scaffolding safety, Blake observes workers using a partially constructed scaffold without guardrails and proper inspection. What is the most appropriate corrective action? A. Allow limited use while reminding workers to be cautious. B. Halt use, perform a full inspection and ensure all safety measures are implemented. C. Advise workers to climb carefully to avoid accidents. D. Reduce scaffold height temporarily to continue work. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. OSHA mandates that scaffolds be fully inspected and meet safety requirements before use. Guardrails, proper access, and load capacity must be verified. Allowing use without compliance exposes workers to falls and structural hazards. Partial measures like cautioning workers or reducing height do not meet regulatory standards. Effective training emphasizes pre-use inspection, hazard correction, and procedural ensuring that scaffolding is safe, minimizing fall risks, and reinforcing a culture of proactive safety rather than reactive compliance. Question 10. During the process of emergency response planning, Mr. White must train his HVACR team on fire evacuation procedures in mechanical rooms. What strategy best aligns with OSHA guidance and effective adult training principles? A. Review procedures verbally once at the start of employment. B. Conduct realistic drills, assign roles, and evaluate performance regularly. C. Post-evacuation signs only without active practice. D. Expect employees to memorize procedures individually. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Effective emergency response training combines drills, role assignment, and feedback, reinforcing situational awareness and team coordination. Passive methods, such as posting signs or verbal review alone, fail to prepare employees for high-stress situations. Drills help identify gaps, improve response times, and build muscle memory. OSHA emphasizes that emergency planning requires practical training and ongoing evaluation to ensure that employees can execute procedures safely during fires, chemical releases, or other emergencies, particularly in confined or high-risk HVACR environments. Question 11. Based on the information, HRConquer is training new HVACR technicians on proper PPE selection for brazing operations. One technician insists that gloves alone are sufficient protection. Should HRConquer emphasize A. Gloves alone are adequate as long as they are heat resistant. B. Comprehensive PPE including gloves, goggles, flame-resistant clothing, and respiratory protection is required. C. Only eye protection is needed for short tasks. E. PPE is optional if a fire extinguisher is nearby. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. OSHA standards require a complete set of PPE for high heat operations like brazing. Gloves protect hands, but eyes, respiratory systems, and body require additional protection against burns, sparks, and fumes. Relying on partial protection or proximity to a fire extinguisher does not mitigate hazards. Trainers must emphasize hazard assessment, proper PPE selection, and safe work practices. Demonstrating correct equipment use and explaining risks reinforces the hierarchy of controls and instills safety awareness in adult learners. Question 12. During the process of fall protection training, Kim observes a trainee improperly securing a harness anchor point. Which approach best reinforces safe behavior? A. Let the trainee continue while verbally correcting mistakes. B. Stop the activity, explain correct anchor point criteria, and provide hands-on practice. C. Only provide written instructions for later review. D. Allow the trainee to self-correct through trial and error. Answer. Correct answer. D. Explanation. Hands-on demonstration and immediate correction are critical for teaching fall protection safely. Verbal instructions or self-correction alone do not guarantee proper understanding or prevent injury. Trainees must learn anchor selection, harness fit, and system inspection through supervised practice. OSHA emphasizes that fall protection failures can be fatal, so training must reinforce proper procedures, verify competency, and include immediate feedback. Combining explanation with practical exercises ensures skill retention and hazard mitigation. Question 13. From a practical standpoint, Mr. Evans is teaching HVACR technicians how to safely handle compressed gas cylinders. One cylinder shows minor rust on its base. What is the appropriate action? A. Continue using the cylinder if pressure is stable. B. Remove the cylinder from service and inspect according to OSHA and manufacturer guidelines. C. Spray the cylinder with lubricant to prevent further rust. D. Tilt the cylinder to check for leaks and proceed if none are detected. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Any cylinder showing corrosion must be removed from service until inspected. Rust can weaken the container, risking leaks or rupture. OSHA requires proper storage, handling, and inspection of compressed gas cylinders to prevent catastrophic incidents. Temporary fixes like lubrication do not ensure safety, and visual inspection alone cannot confirm structural integrity. Trainers should stress preventive maintenance, proper storage, and adherence to hazard control principles, including engineering and administrative controls before use. Question 14. While examining emergency response planning, is Foster simulates a refrigerant leak in a training session? Which teaching method best prepares trainees for real emergencies? A. Conducting live drills with role-playing and evaluating response. B. Distributing printed emergency procedures only. C. Asking trainees to read SDS and answer questions. D. Watching videos of past incidents. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Emergency response training is most effective when trainees actively participate in realistic drills. Role-playing reinforces situational awareness, decision-making, and teamwork under stress. Passive methods like reading SDS or watching videos increase knowledge but fail to develop practical skills. OSHA emphasizes experiential training to ensure employees can respond quickly and safely during chemical releases or refrigerant leaks. Hands-on practice bridges theory and real-world application, improving hazard recognition and response competence. Question 15. Considering the evidence, Mr. Simmons is reviewing scaffolding inspection procedures. The trainee asks why scaffold inspections are required before every shift. How should Mr. Simmons explain? A. To satisfy administrative requirements. B. Daily inspections identify hazards that could change due to environmental or use conditions. C. Once inspected by a supervisor, no further checks are needed. D. Inspections are optional for experienced workers. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Scaffold hazards can arise from environmental factors, altered loads, or accidental damage. OSHA requires daily inspections to identify unsafe conditions before workers are exposed. Administrative compliance alone is insufficient. Inspections ensure real-time hazard mitigation. Experienced workers may overlook subtle risks, so inspections reinforce safety culture. Trainers should emphasize inspection checklists, hazard recognition, and corrective actions, promoting proactive safety and reducing fall risk by ensuring scaffolds meet regulatory and manufacturer requirements. Question 16. Under the assumption that a trainee in Mr. Lopez's class is uncertain about lockout-tagout, which demonstration best conveys its importance? A. Energize unit without locks to show speed benefits. B. Simulate accidental startup with properly locked out system and discuss potential injuries. C. Describe procedures verbally without demonstration. D. Use diagrams only, skipping hands-on practice. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. LOTO training is most effective when trainees witness the consequences of failure in a controlled simulation. Demonstrating potential hazards highlights the critical nature of energy isolation. Verbal descriptions or diagrams alone do not provide experiential understanding, which is essential for adult learners. OSHA emphasizes that unexpected energy release can result in serious injury or death. Trainers should combine discussion, demonstration, and hands-on practice to instill procedural discipline and ensure comprehension of hazard prevention strategies. Question 17. Through careful analysis of HVACR hazard communication, DIAS notices workers ignoring SDS information for new cleaning chemicals. What teaching approach best reinforces safe chemical handling? A. Show past incident reports linked to improper SDS use. B. Allow workers to handle chemicals without consulting SDS. C. Only include SDS in employee manuals. D. Emphasize memorization of chemical names. Answer. Correct answer. D. Explanation. Safe chemical handling relies on understanding hazards, PPE, and emergency responses documented in SDS. Passive distribution or memorization of names alone does not prevent exposure. Trainers must use incident examples and interactive exercises to emphasize reading, interpreting, and applying SDS information. This approach aligns with OSHA HAZCOM standards, ensuring employees understand risks, proper PPE selection, and safe work practices. Reinforcing active engagement and situational awareness fosters compliance and reduces potential injury or environmental harm. Question 18. Given the circumstances, Mr. Ortega is instructing trainees on confined space entry for HVACR ductwork. A trainee suggests entering a duct without testing for oxygen levels. How should Mr. Ortega respond? A. Permit entry if the worker is experienced. B. Require testing for oxygen, combustible gases, and potential toxic contaminants before entry. C. Rely on ventilation alone to maintain safety. D. Allow entry with just PPE for protection. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Confined spaces present risks of asphyxiation and toxic exposure. OSHA mandates atmospheric testing for oxygen, combustible gases, and toxic substances before entry, regardless of experience. PPE alone does not eliminate hazards. Trainers must emphasize hazard recognition, use of monitoring equipment, and rescue procedures. Understanding these principles ensures compliance and safety during ductwork or boiler maintenance. Practical demonstrations, along with discussion of past incidents, reinforce the critical need for pre-entry testing and proper entry protocols. Question 19. When faced with stairway safety in HVACR work, his Patel observes workers using a temporary stair without handrails. What action aligns with OSHA compliance? A. Allow work to continue with cautionary signage. B. Install temporary handrails or alternative fall protection before use. C. Rely on PPE to prevent injuries. D. Limit use to one worker at a time. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. OSHA requires guardrails or fall protection for stairways with exposed edges. Temporary signage or PPE alone does not mitigate fall hazards. Proper installation of handrails or alternative protective systems ensures safety compliance. Trainers must teach hazard assessment, engineering controls, and corrective measures. Emphasizing practical remediation, verification, and ongoing inspection develops a proactive safety culture and reinforces the procedural compliance is non-negotiable, minimizing injury risk in high-traffic areas of construction and HVACR sites. Question 20. In an effort to improve hazard identification skills, Mr. Singh asks trainees to walk through an active HVACR worksite. Which method is most effective for teaching identification of potential hazards? A. Passive observation without discussion. B. Conducting guided walkthroughs with discussion, hazard recognition, and mitigation strategies. C. Giving a checklist to complete individually without explanation. D. Only showing photos of hazards in previous sites. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Active walkthroughs with guided discussion allow trainees to recognize hazards in real contexts, understand risk severity, and propose mitigation strategies. Passive observation or checklists alone do not provide sufficient understanding. Trainers should integrate scenario analysis, peer discussion, and practical examples. OSHA emphasizes that effective hazard identification reduces accidents by reinforcing situational awareness and applying hierarchy of controls. Experiential learning ensures trainees can transfer knowledge to future work sites, fostering a proactive safety culture rather than reactive compliance. Question 21. In the context of rooftop HVACR unit maintenance, Mr. Alvarez notices a worker attempting to move a condenser without mechanical lifting equipment. Which action best aligns with OSHA guidelines and safe lifting practices? A. Allow the worker to lift it manually to save time. B. Stop the task and use mechanical lifting devices or a coordinated team lift. C. Instruct the worker to lift only if another employee supervises. D. Reduce the load by partially disassembling the unit without additional controls. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. OSHA requires the use of engineering controls or team coordination to safely lift heavy equipment. Manual lifting alone, even under supervision, increases risk of musculoskeletal injuries and accidents. Proper planning, mechanical aids, and adherence to safe rigging principles mitigate hazards. Trainers should emphasize hazard recognition, pre-lift evaluation, and the hierarchy of controls to ensure compliance. Supervisory oversight cannot replace proper lifting procedures or mechanical assistance, and disassembly without controls does not eliminate the risk of injury. Question 22. Through careful analysis of electrical safety, Bennett observes a trainee bypassing lockout-tagout on an energized unit to test a system. What should she stress to the trainee? A. PPE can fully protect against electrical shock. B. Lockout, tagout, and energy verification are mandatory before any maintenance. C. Only minor tasks require LOTO procedures. D. Supervisor's approval is sufficient to bypass procedures. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. LOTO procedures prevent accidental energization that can cause arc flash or electrocution. PPE alone cannot substitute for proper energy control. OSHA mandates verification of de-energized systems before work. Supervisory permission or task size does not eliminate the hazard. Trainers should focus on procedural compliance, hazard recognition, and situational awareness. Hands-on demonstration of proper LOTO application reinforces understanding, ensuring technicians internalize the critical safety practices required to prevent severe injury or death in HVACR electrical maintenance. Question 23. When considering confined space entry in an HVACR boiler room, Mr. Franklin notices trainees neglecting atmospheric testing before entry. What is the safest course of action? A. Permit entry if trainees wear respirators. B. Prohibit entry until oxygen levels, toxic gases, and combustibles are tested and safe. C. Use fans to ventilate only and allow entry. D. Rely on EPE to mitigate all hazards. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Confined spaces can have oxygen-deficient or toxic atmospheres, posing life-threatening risks. OSHA requires pre-entry testing regardless of PPE. Ventilation alone does not ensure safety, and relying solely on PPE is insufficient. Trainers must instill hazard recognition, proper testing protocols, and emergency response planning. Demonstrations of monitoring devices and controlled simulations reinforce learning. Compliance ensures worker protection, teaches practical assessment, and emphasizes that hazard mitigation relies on procedural control rather than reactive measures. Question 24. According to recent studies, Ortiz is reviewing refrigerant leak scenarios. A small leak occurs in a poorly ventilated mechanical room. Which immediate response best aligns with safety protocols? A. Continue work, assuming the leak is minor. B. Evacuate personnel, ventilate the area, and follow emergency procedures. C. Cover the leak and monitor while continuing work. D. Only alert the supervisor without evacuating. Answer. Correct answer. D. Explanation. Refrigerant leaks can displace oxygen and create respiratory hazards. OSHA requires evacuation, proper ventilation, and emergency procedures to prevent injury. Ignoring leaks or attempting temporary measures exposes workers to asphyxiation and chemical exposure. Trainers should emphasize hazard recognition, emergency response, and adherence to procedural controls. Proper incident response ensures regulatory compliance and protects both personnel and equipment. Supervisory notification alone does not satisfy safety requirements and may delay critical interventions. Question 25. From multiple perspectives, Mr. Chang is training on hazard communication. A trainee questions why SDS review is mandatory for a frequently used cleaning solvent. What is the most accurate explanation? A. SDS are optional if workers are familiar with the chemical. B. SDS provide vital information on hazards, PPE, and emergency procedures regardless of familiarity. C. Only new employees need to review SDS. D. SDS are primarily for record keeping, not practical safety. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. SDS are legally required to communicate chemical hazards, protective measures, and emergency response. Familiarity does not negate risks. OSHA mandates that all personnel consult SDS for every chemical used. Trainers should stress the practical application of SDS, linking hazard information to real-world handling, PPE selection, and emergency preparedness. Administrative purposes alone are insufficient. Reinforcing this concept ensures technicians understand the rationale behind safety protocols and can apply hazard knowledge in daily HVACR operations. Question 26. When evaluating scaffolding safety, Mr. Hamilton observes a partially constructed scaffold with missing guardrails. What is the appropriate corrective action? A. Allow work with cautionary signs. B. Hold work, perform a full inspection, and install proper guardrails or fall protection. C. Limit access to one worker at a time. D. Rely on PPE to prevent falls. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. OSHA requires guardrails or fall protection before scaffold use. Signage, limited access, or PPE alone does not mitigate fall hazards. Proper inspection and installation of protective measures ensure worker safety and regulatory compliance. Trainers must teach scaffold hazard recognition, structural integrity checks, and corrective action procedures. Reinforcing a proactive safety culture emphasizes that mitigation relies on engineering and administrative controls, not merely personal protection or restricted usage. Question 27. While analyzing HVACR lifting operations, Sanchez observes workers moving heavy compressors manually. Which strategy best prevents musculoskeletal injuries and aligns with OSHA guidance? A. Allow lifting if team members assist. B. Utilize mechanical lifting devices, proper rigging, and team coordination. C. Instruct workers to lift carefully without devices. D. Limit lifting to off-peak hours only. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Safe lifting requires mechanical aids, proper rigging, and coordinated team effort. Manual lifting alone, even with assistance, can cause strain and injury. OSHA emphasizes hazard mitigation through engineering controls and ergonomic practices. Trainers should instruct on load assessment, device selection, and safe lifting techniques. Experiential practice and hazard discussion ensure understanding. Limiting work hours or relying on careful lifting without devices does not adequately reduce risk, whereas structured planning and mechanical support align with regulatory and best practice standards. Question 20. In light of recent developments, Mr. Patel's training on brazing in confined mechanical rooms. Sparks ignite nearby combustibles. What should he emphasize to prevent recurrence? A. Only wear PPE during operations. B. Conduct pre-work hazard assessment, remove combustibles, and implement fire watch. C. Rely on fire extinguishers after ignition. D. Assume minor sparks are unavoidable and continue work. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Preventing fire during brazing requires pre-work hazard assessment, removing combustibles, ensuring ventilation, and establishing a fire watch. PPE alone cannot prevent ignition, and reliance on extinguishers is reactive rather than preventive. Trainers should emphasize hazard recognition, engineering, and administrative controls, and emergency planning. Demonstrating proper setup and procedures teaches technicians minimize risk proactively. OSHA standards require active measures to mitigate fire hazards, highlighting the importance of planning over reaction. Question 29. With respect to emergency response, Clark is developing a training plan for refrigerant leaks. Which method ensures adult learners retain practical response skills? A. Distribute written procedures and rely on memorization. B. Conduct live drills, assign roles, and provide post-exercise evaluation. C. Watch videos of prior incidents only. D. Conduct verbal review at the start of employment. Answer. Correct answer. D. Explanation. Effective emergency response training requires active, hands-on drills with role assignment and evaluation. Written procedures, videos, or verbal review alone do not develop situational awareness or practical skill. OSHA emphasizes experiential learning for chemical releases, fire, and ventilation hazards. Trainers should simulate real scenarios, assess response, and provide feedback to reinforce correct procedures. This approach ensures trainees internalize emergency actions, respond appropriately under stress, and comply with regulatory expectations for safety and hazard control. Question 30. During HVAC PPE training, Mr. Rivera observes trainees removing respirators in areas with refrigerant fumes. What is the correct course of action? A. Allow removal if exposure seems minor. B. Reinforce the use of PPE, proper fit, and continuous monitoring of air quality. C. Permit removal for comfort breaks only. D. Rely on ventilation alone to mitigate exposure. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. OSHA mandates continuous EPE use when airborne hazards exist. Removing respirators compromises protection from refrigerants or other contaminants. Trainers must emphasize correct EPE selection, fit, and adherence to hazard monitoring. Ventilation assists but does not replace PPE in active exposure zones. Dulled learners should practice proper donning usage and emergency procedures to maintain safety. Reinforcement through observation and corrective feedback ensures compliance, reduces inhalation risk, and cultivates a culture of proactive hazard control in HVACR operations.